Hi friends, let's have a chat about triggers. Like, we hear this term so much, yet do we actually know what a trigger is? And do we actually know how to absolve and reconcile when we are triggered? So even if you've been like on the healing journey for a while, right? So I've been doing a lot of shadow work and conscious excavating of triggers and sabotaging behaviors for quite a few years, for at least 5 years. And even still, there comes times when I have a strong emotional reaction to an external circumstance, typically fueled by someone in close relation to me. So typically we can think like, oh my God, it's the other person's fault. It's the other person that made me act this way. And I understand why it would be easy to point fingers and blame shift. I do. However, it is the only thing that we can control is how we respond to circumstances, because we are forever triggered. The point is learning why we are triggered and learning how to lessen the reaction and learn how to respond, because a reactive response is emotionally charged and typically does not absolve and does not actually communicate what the actual core is attempting to be communicated. So we can think like, oh my God, I thought that I have covered this. I thought that I was healed from this. I thought I was over this. Well, guess what? There's years and years and years. Our whole lifetime has compounded and exasperated and completely condensed these trigger points within our body and within our emotional, our cognitive receptors and the patterns, the behavioral responses. So there's many different layers to unpack and uncover, and each one illuminates a little bit more of our wounded self. So instead of fighting the trigger, instead of leaning into like, oh my God, I must ignore this, I must run away or escape, or I can't believe this is coming up again, having the shaming type of conversations with ourselves, we can begin to become curious about this and invite the transformation, because our truths are revealed within the trigger points. Our trigger points hold the gold. That's where the work is. Our work is within the triggers. So how are triggers actually formed? Well, when everything comes back to childhood, everything comes back to a feeling of when we didn't feel safe, secure, heard, valued, validated, and nurtured. So when we were younger, we have these core wounds that were put on by us, by our caregivers. And if our caregivers were not emotionally available, typically that would mean that we have a lot of emotional disconnect within ourselves. Because then we started operating from this programming of whatever it was that our caregivers couldn't give us. We wound up adjusting our actions and behaviors to either defend against ourselves, to fight for what we need, or to manipulate to get what we need to feel safe, secure, loved, and cared for. And every time we added to that behavior, it exasperated and also just confirmed the behavior and continued to put more energy into the trigger point. So at the root of triggers, they are survival mechanisms. Our brains are wired to mechanically set off our nervous system and look for patterns in which we feel unsafe, in which we feel like our physical security and stability is being threatened. And so whether that be from somebody responding or not responding in a way, our body actually begins to respond to that to that trigger point. We get we can feel that within our chest tightening up, within our anxiety, like our jaws clenching, within our tummy starting to get upset. There's so many different somatic experiences that can happen when we are actually triggered. So the invitation is to first to allow yourself to recognize, okay, this is a strong emotional reaction. What is actually going on here? There is a power within the pause, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of discipline to learn how to not react, to actually wait, slow down, let's examine what's really going on. So for me, when I feel a strong emotional trigger, what I tend to do is I state, okay, I know that this is a strong emotional reaction. I know that this isn't true, but I don't know exactly what it's connecting to at this point. So for instance, I have a core wound of not feeling validated or heard, like my voice doesn't matter. And so in relationships, if I feel like unheard or like I have to fight for my needs to be met, or feeling shamed for asking for my needs to be met, I get very defensive and I start to put energy outward and start to like raise my voice and blame and point fingers. So this is a current trigger. This has happened for me recently, and it's a beautiful thing because I am able to get deeper to the core of what's really going on. So what I do is then I state, okay, like I know that this isn't like my mind is telling me something that I must force my beliefs onto you. You must hear what I have to say. But yet I know that at some capacity it's not true. Like I don't need to be heard. I don't need to be validated. I can do that myself. And that's what I've learned, is that I learned how to be there for myself. So what I do is I simply state that out loud, and I recognize within my body, like, where am I actually sensing this and where am I feeling this? Well, right now it's within my chest and within my throat, like I swallowed a frog or something. So then I pause, I recognize that, and I assess what to do. So what do I physically do now? So typically doing deep breathing. And then I recognize, okay, so what was it that I was actually wanting to achieve with being heard? I am still valued and validated, even if that other person doesn't respond or react in the way that I expected them to. I then go through the list of experiences that I have felt like this a lot of my life. And I then show up for those younger versions of myself and recognize, like, it's okay. Like your relationship is not going to fall apart because you don't feel heard. Honestly, and even saying that, I kind of question myself. Either way, what I do know is that I can walk myself through the physical symptoms. I can trace back to, okay, when else have I felt this way? When have I been able to show up for myself? And also, how can I begin to navigate my internal landscape without projecting my wounds onto someone else? Like, another question would be, what belief or memory is this bringing to the surface? Am I actually reacting to this situation, or am I reacting to the many other situations that have happened prior to this? And what would it feel like to show up for yourself in a way that you wanted others to show up for you? What if this trigger is really just a story that is actually sabotaging you from feeling fulfilled and meeting your own needs? The important part is to learn how to have compassion for yourself, to not react, to allow yourself grace and space, to be able to hold yourself and to be nurturing with you along the way. And what would it feel like to actually thank the trigger for showing you where you have yet to explore?